Now, without further ado, I want to introduce David Brandon. David is a developer on the Bitovi React team with a background in Angular, Node, C#, Java, SQL, and DevOps. He's led or helped lead projects for companies like STR and Experian and puts heavy emphasis on client satisfaction, code quality, testability, and training. For fun, he works on electronics projects, does woodworking, and even dabbles in game development. David, the floor is yours.
How y'all doing today? So just going to give a brief talk about Storybook, and it's pretty awesome. This is going to be pretty high level and kind of conceptual. So yeah, let's go ahead and jump into it. So quick info. It's self-documenting. It enables your project to be self-documenting, modular. It gives you modular self-contained components, offers a stable, isolated development environment, and is ideal for review by UX and QA, as well as other developers and basically anybody who wants to get more familiar with, the application. So the self-documenting, just using it kind of bakes documentation into your entire process. So just by doing the development. Turn my mic. I'm being told I need to turn my mic down, so we'll see if I can handle that. The resulting documentation ends up looking very professional and very much like what you might see on the React website or something like that, and lets you get the most out of your documentation. Really good for onboarding or just getting familiar with other parts of the application you may not have worked with before. New cases for functionality, a great way of documenting your additions. That's really good for in addition to unit testing and all that kind of stuff, can be good for analyzing bugs and things like that as well. So self-contained components, very similar to how unit testing forces you to write more modular components. You end up doing the same thing with Storybook. So it ends up increasing, the quality of your code in a lot of different ways. But at the same time, it isn't a unit test. So you can pull in other aspects to show integrating with, larger pieces of the application. One example might be, you have a button component, but you want to show how this button component works inside of maybe, a list or, other kinds of larger components. So it's also really good for doing development. You don't necessarily have to run the entire application, and get all of its state set up with just the right way to trigger a certain thing that you're trying to do development on. Basically, you can just put it into that state right there in the story, and you're good to go, and go through a whole bunch of different states very, very quickly without having to, get the app into some other kind of state. This can be really, really useful if you're, for example, if you're spinning up a new project and maybe the back end isn't ready, but you still want to go ahead and start on the front end. That can be one area. Or if you're having trouble with, some service at the moment, and you don't want to be completely down, want to be able to continue working on the front end, then you can still do that. And yeah. Perfect for doing review by UX or QA. Especially once you get to a point where that's kind of how the entire team functions, is by thinking about, things at a component level rather than the entire application. Then you can start QAing and reviewing individual components. Smaller modular components. You could do it for larger, like pages and that kind of stuff, higher level components, if you wanted. There's some caveats to that, so it's not necessarily what you want to do, but it can be useful in some cases. So streamline the process. Yeah, so that's pretty much it. So what's it like to work in practice? What does that look like? It's very similar to writing a unit test or something. The complexity, is about the same, but you get a whole lot of benefit from it as far as and here in a minute, I was going to show a few examples on the Storybook website, and that you'll see what I'm talking about with that. One of the other things you can do with this is examples, like basically how might somebody want to use this component that I'm building? What are some real world cases in the actual application that somebody might be interested in with this in regard to this component? Try and think about a few of those, like how do you use this with an asynchronous call or something if you're needing something like that. Maybe it makes a call to the back end, like a button or something. How do you use it with the spinner to make it also show like a waiting or a loading kind of thing, things like that. It can be really good for baking in acceptance criteria and using that to help QA do their review and all that. New parameters, document those new parameters, get those in there, let people see what exactly that parameter does, and reproduce bugs very similar to like a unit test again, except you can actually see it, you can actually work on it and demonstrate it in the actual application, more or less, and then squash it. So some additional features, higher level components, controls and actions, really useful stuff. I'll show those here in a second. It also has some unit test integration. I haven't dove into that too much, but it looks kind of interesting. And then lots and lots of really powerful add-ons for it as well. I wanted to show a few add-ons here, but I ran out of time, so. Additional resources and the Storybook website, they've got a really awesome showcase of a bunch of different sites that are using Storybook and how they're using it. And like GitHub is one I was going to take a look at here in a second, and some really good tutorials too. So, and with that, I'll go ahead and stop sharing this and see if I can share a window here. Let's see. Yeah. Showcase, GitHub. Hopefully y'all can see all that. It looks like you probably can. So yeah, here is kind of a real world example. This is actually GitHub, and showing a few controls and actions and what you can do with it. So I don't know if you can see that, but you're changing the button size and all that kind of stuff. It doesn't look like they're doing much in the way of actions. Let's go down here and take a look at a list. Let's see this. Examples, action list. So yeah, basically you can just go through and look at everything that they have and just kind of some real world examples of seeing their components working, and you can also go over here and get the code for any of these as well, and actually look at it in the application, not to mention the fact that this is in your source control repo, so you can go look at the actual story itself, but you do have it here as well. So you end up with some very professional looking documentation that everyone on the team can reference, developers, QA, UX. Again, this would be perfect for like doing UX reviews and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, that's just kind of like a high level overview of Storybook and kind of what you can do with it. And hopefully it encourages you to take a look at whether or not this would be a good fit for your team. I think it probably would be. So your team and your project. So, and that's pretty much it.
Ooh, there's a good one from Patrick. What's your single favorite thing about Storybook? You gotta pick one.
One, I kind of like this coming from a developer. I kind of like the fact that you don't necessarily have to have the entire application spun up to be able to do your development. If you just need to get in there and change, something or add a new feature, then you can just go in there and add it. And when you get done, maybe go and check it in the application, make sure it's actually working the way you think it is, of course. But yeah, it's just I think that's pretty cool. But it's kind of a toss-up between so many different features. I mean, there's some pretty cool add-ons out there. So,
opposite question from Connor. In your opinion, where does Storybook fall flat?
That's a good question. Good question. Where does it fall flat? I mean, for what it does, I think it's pretty good. Obviously it can't do everything. So, yeah, that's a good question though. I'd have to think about that one some more actually. So,
yeah, I agree with Justin on the old modlet pattern, but that's a talk for another day.
That's the next one, right?
Yeah, from Noah, do you think Storybook can replace tests, or visual testing or integration tests?
Not replace, augment, definitely. The good thing about automated integration testing is it's automated, so you can have it run as part of your build pipeline and run through and check and make sure that it's working the way that you intend. That isn't, what it excels at is just kind of doing, at least from a QA perspective, is doing like spot testing and all that kind of stuff. And just kind of going through and making sure that it's working the way that it's visually working the way that you think it is. And if it is, you can kind of bake that into an integration test or a functional test or something like that. So, yeah, I don't see it as a replacement, but as like an additional thing to help out with testing. So it might replace, at least in some conditions, QA people going and testing in the application, like manually testing in the application. At least, in some cases. You probably still want to be doing that some, but so.
All right, Justin has got a complicated question about the builder setup. Take it away, Justin.
Yeah, this is comparing it to like old school modlets with steel and whatnot. So how does its build work? Is it all Webpack under the hood? Do you need a Webpack build that essentially includes every single component and module in your system, or is it able to essentially like build on demand, where you say, oh, I need this, like I need this module? Yeah, I guess I guess you're writing your stories and those necessarily import your, so it just does one big storybook build. I guess
right. Yeah, I believe it's using Webpack. Not 100% on that, but yeah, and it rebuilds, and the latest versions build pretty quick. So, yeah.
If you're using some other build system, then you need a Storybook to integrate with that. If you're using like Vite or something like that.
Yeah, I haven't actually, to be honest, I haven't actually set it up yet on my own project. Yeah, so I'm not 100% on some of that, but yeah, I do know that it integrates pretty well. So I'd have to get back to you on that.